When you think of Pol Pot, you probably imagine a man responsible for one of history's darkest chapters, the killing fields of Cambodia, where nearly 2 million people died in just 4 years. But what did this man actually do every single day? Did he personally oversee the murders, or did he hide away in secret bases while others carried out his orders? What did he eat for breakfast while families were being torn apart? Did he ever show emotion, or was he cold and distant even to those closest to him? Behind the face of the Khmer Rouge was a daily life more paranoid, more isolated and stranger than most people know. Unlike many dictators who lived in grand palaces, Pol Pot spent most of his time hidden in the jungles of Cambodia. Even when he controlled the entire country from 1975 to 1979, he rarely stayed in one place for long. He moved between secret bases, always afraid that someone might try to kill him or that foreign enemies were closing in. Most mornings, Pol Pot woke up around 6 or 7 in the morning. This was earlier than leaders like Hitler or Stalin, but his reasons were different. He didn't wake early because he was energetic or hardworking. He woke early because he was deeply paranoid and believed that staying alert kept him safe. His sleeping quarters were always simple. Even when he had power, he refused luxury. He slept on a wooden bed with a thin mattress covered by a mosquito net. There were no fancy decorations, no paintings on the walls. Everything around him was plain and controlled, just like the society he was trying to build. Each morning, an aide would bring him a simple breakfast. Unlike Hitler, who was a strict vegetarian, Pol Pot ate whatever was available, usually rice porridge, sometimes with a bit of fish or vegetables. He wasn't picky about food, but he also didn't enjoy it. Eating was just something he had to do to stay alive. He dressed in the same black pajama-style uniform that all Khmer Rouge members wore. This was intentional. By dressing like everyone else, he wanted to appear as though he was just another revolutionary, not a dictator. But everyone knew the truth. Pol Pot held all the power and no one dared to question him. After breakfast, Pol Pot would usually meet with a small group of his closest advisors. These weren't open discussions where people shared different opinions. Instead, they were careful, tense meetings where everyone agreed with whatever Pol Pot said. Disagreeing with him even slightly could mean death. His most trusted ally was a man named Nuon Chea, who acted as his second-in-command. Another key figure was Tamak, a brutal military leader known as the Butcher because of how many people he killed without hesitation. Then there was Khieu Samphan, who served as the public face of the regime while Pol Pot stayed hidden in the shadows. What most people don't know is that Pol Pot rarely gave direct orders to kill specific individuals. Instead, he created a system where paranoia did the work for him. He would make vague statements like, "We must eliminate the hidden enemies within," or "Traitors are everywhere, even among us." His commanders would then interpret these words as permission to arrest, torture, and execute anyone they suspected. He kept detailed records of everything. The Khmer Rouge documented their own crimes obsessively. At the S-21 prison in Phnom Penh, guards took photographs of every prisoner before they were killed. They wrote down confessions, most of them forced through torture. Pol Pot believed that keeping records proved they were fighting. During these morning meetings, Pol Pot would also review reports from different zones of Cambodia. His country was divided into regions, and each region had a leader who reported back to him. If a region failed to meet its rice production goals, Pol Pot didn't see it as a problem with his policies. He saw it as sabotage. He would then order investigations, which almost always led to arrests and executions. Pol Pot spent much of his afternoons reading and writing. He saw himself as an intellectual, a philosopher who was creating a perfect society based on his own version of communism. But his ideas were twisted and extreme. He had been educated in France in the 1950s, where he became interested in communist ideas. But unlike other communist leaders who focused on workers in cities, Pol Pot hated cities entirely. He believed that cities were corrupt, that intellectuals were dangerous, and that the only pure people were poor farmers who worked in the rice fields. When the Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia in 1975, one of Pol Pot's first actions was to empty the cities. Within days, millions of people were forced to leave their homes in Phnom Penh and other cities and march into the countryside. Families were separated. The sick and elderly were left behind to die. Anyone who resisted was shot. Pol Pot watched these reports come in with no visible emotion. He didn't seem to care about the suffering. In his mind, this was necessary. He was building a new Cambodia, and anyone who didn't fit into his vision had to be removed. In the afternoons, he often worked on speeches and writings, though most of these were never shared publicly. Pol Pot was obsessed with secrecy. For the first 2 years of his rule, the outside world didn't even know his real name. He was only known as Brother Number One. Even many people within the Khmer Rouge didn't know what he looked like. He also spent time listening to radio broadcasts from other countries, especially Vietnam, China, and Thailand. He was obsessed with the idea that foreign enemies were plotting against him. This paranoia grew worse over time and led to even more killings inside Cambodia. Lunch was a quiet affair, usually eaten alone or with just 1 or 2 people. Pol Pot didn't enjoy large meals or social gatherings like Hitler did. He preferred silence. He ate quickly and without pleasure, usually more rice, maybe some soup, occasionally fruit. What's chilling is that while he was eating his simple meal, thousands of people across Cambodia were starving to death. His policies had destroyed the country's food supply. People were forced to work in the fields from sunrise to sunset with almost no food. Families were separated, children were taken from their parents, and anyone caught stealing even a handful of rice could be killed. Pol Pot knew this was happening. He received reports, but he didn't see it as a failure. He saw it as a test. In his mind, the Cambodian people needed to be purified through suffering. He believed that only by stripping away everything, family, religion, education, even personal identity, could a new, perfect society be built. One thing most people don't know is that Pol Pot had a family. He was married to a woman named Q Poneri, who had once been a teacher. But their relationship was strange and distant. She suffered from mental illness, likely made worse by the horrors happening around her. Pol Pot rarely spoke about her, and they spent little time together. Later, he secretly married a much younger woman named Mia Sun, but he kept this hidden even from most of his inner circle. In the late afternoons, Pol Pot would sometimes take walks around the compound where he was staying. These weren't long, peaceful strolls like Hitler enjoyed in the mountains. Instead, they were short, cautious walks where he was always surrounded by armed guards. He was terrified of being assassinated. He never stayed in the same place for more than a few weeks. Even within his own camps, he moved between different buildings, sleeping in a different bed almost every night. He trusted almost no one. During these walks, he would sometimes talk to his guards or aides, but these weren't real conversations. He would lecture them about the revolution, about the importance of staying loyal, about the enemies lurking in the shadows. The people around him learned to stay quiet and nod. Speaking too much or saying the wrong thing could be deadly. Pol Pot also had a strange hobby that few people know about. He loved listening to traditional Cambodian music and watching classical Khmer dance performances. Even as he was destroying Cambodian culture, forcing people to forget their past and abandon their traditions, he privately enjoyed the very culture he was trying to erase. This contradiction didn't seem to bother him. Evenings were when Pol Pot held more meetings, often going late into the night. These meetings were different from the ones in the morning, more secretive, more intense. This was when decisions about purges were made. The Khmer Rouge didn't just kill people they saw as enemies from outside. They killed their own members constantly. Pol Pot was convinced that traitors had infiltrated the movement. He believed that Vietnam had planted spies, that the CIA was working against him, that even his closest allies might betray him. So he created a culture of terror within his own ranks. People were encouraged to report on each other. If someone seemed too friendly with the wrong person, or if they questioned an order, they could be arrested. Many high-ranking Khmer Rouge officials who had been with Pol Pot since the beginning were later tortured and killed on his orders. One of the most disturbing facts is that Pol Pot almost never showed anger or emotion. People who met him described him as soft-spoken, even polite. He smiled often, he never raised his voice. But behind that calm exterior was a man responsible for ordering the deaths of nearly 2 million people, roughly a quarter of Cambodia's population. During these evening meetings, Pol Pot would sit quietly, listening to reports about arrests and executions. He would nod, ask a few questions, and then move on to the next topic. Killing had become routine, just another part of running the country. Unlike Hitler, who loved watching movies late into the night, Pol Pot had no interest in entertainment. He didn't watch films, didn't listen to music for pleasure, didn't read novels. His entire life revolved around control and survival. Most nights he stayed up late reading reports or writing in notebooks. He kept journals, though most of them were destroyed or lost after his regime fell. In these writings, he reflected on his vision for Cambodia, on the enemies he believed were everywhere, and on his place in history. He saw himself as a great revolutionary, someone who would be remembered as a hero who saved Cambodia from corruption and foreign influence. He genuinely believed that the suffering he caused was necessary, that the killings were justified, and that future generations would thank him. But the reality was very different. By 1978, Vietnam had had enough of the Khmer Rouge's attacks on their border. In January 1979, Vietnamese forces invaded Cambodia and quickly defeated Pol Pot's army. He fled back into the jungle and his regime collapsed. Even after losing power, Pol Pot continued to live in hiding for nearly 20 more years. He never faced trial for his crimes. He never expressed regret. He died in 1998, still claiming that everything he had done was right. So what did Pol Pot actually do all day? He woke early out of fear, not discipline. He held meetings where no one dared disagree. He read reports of starvation and mass murder with no visible emotion. He moved from place to place, always paranoid, always hidden. He believed he was building a perfect society, but instead, he created one of the most brutal regimes in human history. Behind the quiet voice and the calm smile was a man who saw human life as expendable, who trusted no one, and who destroyed an entire country in the name of an impossible dream. So here's a question for you. How does someone like Pol Pot convince himself that what he's doing is right, even as millions die around him? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive into history interesting, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching.